Hello folks and welcome to the channel. Here is a little story on my Lotus Elise. I picked up the car about 2 years ago and it was a total loss because it was way too expensive to get it repaired. As you can see, there's damage all around the car, the rear clamshell, the front clamshell. So I dragged it home and we did an initial assessment on that car. Now the car actually had hit a post in the front and dragged along the post all the way along the side of the car, and it destroyed the front clamshell, the crash box, but also the sill and the rear clamshell. It also damaged badly the diffuser, but the wire that was on the post actually wrapped around the rear axle and that destroyed the gator, so we had to replace all of that. The first thing I did was really to check that the car was not tossed or bent, and it wasn't. And then we replaced the tie rod in the back because that was really bent and not repairable anymore. So we got a brand new kit for that, and I'm quite happy that I did this because this is at the end looking quite good. Replacing or removing the crash box, that was one hell of a job. So once it was off, I trial fitted the new one and I placed all the markings. So when I was placing it finally on with all the bonding on it, I could get it right into the proper space or place without having to shift it around too much, because then it's too late, because that stuff is pretty sticky. So here I'm clamping it into place, and you can see the bar underneath where everything is aligned on, and I'm doing my last minute alignments because it's important that you do that because the clamshell needs to fit on that in the front. Now the front part, the shroud was gone, so here I have a brand new shroud with I'm trial fitting, and I'm also replacing the radiator with a brand new one. Not that it was necessary because the old one didn't leak, but to be honest, once you're at this kind of work, you might as well replace these parts because they are not that extreme expensive. I also got a new fan. I know some people place two fans, I only placed one. And this is the part where you tow the Elise, and hopefully I don't have to tow it anymore. Fitting the shroud for the radiator was actually a little bit of work, and getting the radiator inside, well, that's another tricky part. You need to slide it in a corner, then bend it in, and then finally install some silicone tubes onto the radiator, and I covered it all up with the aluminum plate. Now I started to look on the suspension and I decided to change the ball joints with some raised ball joints. As you can see here, the adjustable ball joints. And I put it all back together, and then finally I decided to, well, let me take it back apart because I still had to remove the drive shaft in the back, or the half shaft as people call it. You can see how badly the gator is damaged. So I got some new ones, we installed them, and I think at the end it started looking pretty good. Now the disc that you see here was also replaced later on because I decided to get brand new discs all around the car, and actually get new triangles because here you can see the upper triangle or the wishbone still having a dent. That was replaced afterwards as well. Here I'm removing it and you can actually see the dent. We also changed all the bushes. And at the end, it turned out that it was worthwhile the effort because I had easy access to the car with all the clamshells removed. If you have the clamshells on it, this is all a little bit more difficult. Checking the brakes discs was not bringing up any surprises. I decided to change them out initially with a brake disc with an aluminum bell, but that turned out to be a problem for the technical inspection, the MOT. So I swapped it out again with a proper disc at the end. We got the caliper sorted out. I've got new flex hoses for the brakes. And then finally, I also decided to replace the bearings on the car. Not that it was really necessary, but I was at it, so I decided let's do it anyway while we have everything open. It's so easy to do it, and um, so after a little bit of work and bleeding the brakes, we were able then to continue, and everything turned out to be quite alright. And as you can see, this is looking pretty neat once we were done. We got a lot of small parts replaced. The manual brake cable was replaced. Here you see, of course, the half shaft, the flex hose for the brakes, and the toe in bar or the tow bar to adjust the rear toe. we did the same thing in the front, and you can also see that we have the wishbones renewed. The real painful thing was really replacing the cables that are used on the shifting mechanism. That was one hell of a job to get this done, and it was so much fiddling. There must be better ways of doing it, but I really had a hard time getting it all into place. At the end, it turned out to be okay, but it took a hell of a lot of time, and I was able to do my first test ride with the car. Now, geometry on the car is very important. So since we changed so many parts, now it was time to adjust the toe in on the rear wheels, the camber, and so on. And for that, I did some very basic calculations, and I used a very basic system like ropes and levels. Afterwards, I've taken the car to a alignment center, and I was spot on. And here you see the adjustment shim for the camber on the car, and they come in different sizes, and you need to measure it and fit it and then remove it. And now it was time for something more seriously. That was the repair of the damaged sill, and therefore you need to take a lot of things apart. And I was cutting off that sill very carefully because you have some tubes running in there, and you don't want to cut through those cooling tubes or any of those conducts that are there, or you don't want to cut into the aluminum. But finally, I got it off and all cleaned up. So I was kind of ready to trial out a brand new sill, but even a brand new sill doesn't fit automatically in it. So I had to cut out some corners to fit it properly, and it's normal that you do that because otherwise you have to take the other part off as well. So here I'm trial fitting the door because I wanted to make sure that everything was all right. I've had too much surprises in the past. So now we are about ready to install it, and I had it already painted in the paint booth, and I have applied all the bonding onto it, and I'm just pressing it on. And one of the things you'll have to do is to fit a bracket in the back that doesn't come with it. So I got a piece of aluminum which I then formed and I bended it, and here you can see the bend. So finally I could fit it. I drilled some holes in it and I applied my favorite product on it, Tech 7, some rivets, and off you go. So now we were kind of ready to start mounting this hull finally. But before doing so, you need to prep the surfaces where the bonding goes. So first of all, you will have to degrease it, and then you need to apply the primer onto that, which is the black stuff, and then you apply that on both sides, also on the sill, and then finally you put the bonding kit on all those areas, and you try to squeeze things into place, and then you try to hold it with clamps in all the different areas, and you fill up the seals. And also in the front, remember where I cut out that piece, I had to install another piece of reinforcement with a piece of aluminum, and believe me, you can't remove that. This is very, very solid. That went surprisingly well. I expected a lot more problems, and now it was time for the rear clamshell, and also for the front clamshell. But this was the rear clamshell. It was a second-hand one, so I inspected all the holes where the bolts go in. I painted it, and I moved over the lights from my old clamshell onto the well, I would say new one, but it was a second-hand one, and I used my engine lift to move it into place. And you may have to put spacers up here and there. It's not that it's going to fit immediately. I also repaired the diffuser, as you can see, and then here you see everything is being put back together. So now it was time for the front clamshell, and this was a second-hand one, but it had a lot of damage on it. On the ground, that was my old one. And you can see on the second-hand one, it has been repaired a couple of times. It had holes and cracks everywhere. So I sanded everything down and we repaired it in the different areas. Some areas I actually repaired with an aluminum panel because I believe personally that this is stronger. You may not agree with me. And here you see me doing that. I'm roughing it up. I'm kind of cleaning it up, so degreasing it. I'm putting the primer up, and then finally I'm putting the bonding up, and now I'm going to stick it on there. And to be honest, this is rock solid. I've done that before and that really works well. And here you see the end result. Now you can't always do that. You may also use fiberglass. Now the lights, that pot where the light fits in, The clamshell I had was damaged, so I recovered the one from my old clamshell and then I placed it all back. And you see also I'm using polyester mats to put things into place. I'm not always using aluminum, of course. And here it is, that clamshell all painted and ready to go. I like to mask off things before I install something because I don't want to scratch things. And here is that clamshell, and you can see how solid that has become. Um, and I'm just going to lift it on there, try to get it into place, make sure the arc is right. Putting the lights back up. This is one of the old lights I recovered. The other one I couldn't. I'm polishing actually the lens on that. And yes, you will have to look quite often behind corners and get sore knuckles. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and very soon you will see my Elise on the road. Thank you for viewing, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.